Hey guys, you have seen this in the stores. It is landscape fabric. And if you have gardened for any length of time, you probably know that landscape fabric is not all it's cracked up to be. In fact, it can be a pretty poor choice in a lot of places, particularly when you lay it down and then you put mulch over top of it. Then you've got weed seeds that come in through the air, integrate into that mulch, and then they start sending their roots out. Then the roots get into the landscape fabric, and you try to pull them out and you start ripping the landscape fabric. The roots have a solid grip, and it's just a nightmare to get these things out. So there is one use that I actually like landscape fabric for that I want to talk to you about. And almost for everything else, I won't even touch landscape fabric anymore. It's just not worth it. But here's what I do like about it. And so here is what I think landscape fabric is actually good for killing off the weeds underneath an area before you plant. Basically, I'm using it as what you call a silage tarp. Now, a silage tarp is different from this. It's not exactly landscape fabric, but it's got a similar purpose, and where it kills off the vegetation that's underneath. It encourages what's underneath to sprout and grow, and then it dies off because it doesn't have the light. Silage tarp is a little different in that water won't penetrate through this. In this case, water will go through the landscape fabric, but light won't. So what I'm hoping to do is kill off the grass underneath here, at least for a couple weeks, so I can start a new garden bed. As you can see here, I've got a few things laid out. I've got a Japanese maple that it's one of those thread leaf types. I'm forgetting the variety name of it at this moment, but this one was at our other house and we transplanted it over to here. And then we've got some hostas that are all going to go in this area, Japanese painted fern right there. So we're going to use this area as a bit of a shade garden. Now down here at the bottom area, we're going to end up putting some landscaping pavers or stepping stones so that we have a clear access point over to the water spout that's right there on the wall. In the past, I've used this landscaping fabric as a walkway down the middle of the vegetable garden. And I think that's another decent purpose for it. But I will tell you, after it being there for a couple of years and pulling it up, it got all kinds of roots embedded into it. And it was very heavy to remove because it retained dirt, roots, Bermuda grass, all kinds of stuff got on it. And it was a bit of a chore to get out of there. So in general, I think landscape fabric can be a good thing, but I don't recommend it for using in flower beds, in vegetable garden beds, or other kind of planting areas where you're going to be putting some sort of covering on top of it. Landscape fabric can also be used in market garden scenarios where they will lay it down, they'll burn holes into it so they can plant directly into that, and that keeps their weeds down for that season. At the end of the season, they pull it back up and then they start with fresh fabric, which I think is perhaps a little bit on the wasteful side, but I understand if you're doing a really large area, you've got to have something to keep those weeds at bay. So after I'm done with this, I'm going to take the landscaping fabric and I'm going to reuse it in another location to kill off more of the sod that's underneath. It is a much slower method than, say, using the tiller like I did in the vegetable garden in a previous video. That method got the sod out of there very quickly so I could get to the soil underneath. This method, it takes time. So I'm not going to be doing anything with this for a few weeks. Gives me plenty of time for the grass to die off underneath it, or at least mostly die off, and at which point then I'll just scrape it off the sod and remove it, and then I'll have a nice garden bed just about ready to go. So I do need to anchor this down a little better. I'm going to get a couple of pots of hostas and stick over here toward this end, maybe some hydrangeas, just something over here on the shady side of the house so that I can keep this down as compact to the ground as I can to help with the smothering of the grass underneath. As you can see, the wind is blowing it up a little bit, and that's just not going to be very effective if I leave it like that. So here you can kind of see what the rough draft looks like. Everything is put out here for the moment just for the purposes of holding down the landscape fabric. It is just weighting it down so that the puffiness will eventually fade and the grass will start to die off, and we'll be able to come in and then scrape off any kind of grass that does remain here in a few weeks. And we are on the shady side of the house. In the morning it gets a little bit of sun, but the rest of the day it's shade, and so it's perfect for these type of plants and this type of garden to be put in. One thing I do want to do eventually, right here where this rain gutter comes out, is I want to have a little bit of a dry creek bed that can direct that water flow out this way so it goes a little further away from the house where it's currently going. We'll just use some of the natural rocks and things for that project. But that'll be later on this year. And for now, we're just going to kill off the ground make sure that the grass is dead, and then we'll be able to start this garden for real. So in my opinion, this is the best use of landscape fabric, just to kill off the ground underneath so that you can plant a new bed later. I do not recommend using landscape fabric as a layer underneath mulch because I find it's just going to be more problems that it's worth doing later on down the road. It might look great that first year, but just wait until the fall seeds come in, and then your second year, it's not so good. So anyway, if this video was helpful or informative, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Thanks for watching.